With our app registered on Facebook, let's start building our authentication module and workflow. So create a new folder in the app folder called auth, and as always, drop in an index.js file. First up, create a constant keyword called passport and bring the module in using the require statement. Next up, bring in the config module like so, since we need to access the FB configuration block that we built earlier. Next, create a keyword called Facebook strategy and bring in the passport-Facebook strategy. And while doing so, bring in the strategy constructor function. This statement goes into the passport Facebook module and imports the constructor function that internally uses the passport OAuth 2 module to offer authentication and login functionality to your app. After this, we'll use module.exports to build an anonymous function that will house all our authentication code. This code would then be injected into our main app. Now, Passport has been built as a core application module that allows strategy implementation modules such as the Passport Facebook module to be plugged in somewhat the same way as you use middleware functions in Express. This makes it extremely simple to plug in any number of strategies and third-party authentication workflows. The core Passport offers base functionality on top of which you build the rest of the workflow. This is quite intuitive because this way you don't have to over-bloat the core plugin, and since authentication providers often change their APIs, upgrades and revisions here mean that only the strategy level modules need to be upgraded and not the core Passport package. So we'll type out passport.use and we'll pass in a new instance of the Facebook strategy method. The Facebook strategy method requires two things: a configuration block, which provides access to the app ID, the app secret, a callback URL, and optionally an array with the desired user data keys, and a callback function that is invoked once the control comes back to Passport after the authentication process is done. Now, remember we had built the FB configuration block earlier? We will simply plug that in here by typing config.fb, which uses the config loader module to access and inject in a JavaScript object as we built earlier. This is precisely how Passport wants the configuration object to be like, and hence the reason why I built it this way. Next, put a comma and create an arrow function that brings in the access token, a refresh token, the user's profile, and access to a method called done, which gets the data out of the authentication process and into the rest of the workflow within our app. The access token and refresh token are provided by Facebook as a part of the OAuth 2.0 process. In the case of OAuth 1.0, as in the case of Twitter, we get a token and a token secret instead. This callback function is known as the verify callback because its job is to find a user profile in the local MongoDB instance using the profile.id, which refers to the user ID as sent by Facebook or the third-party provider. If we do find a matching user profile internally, we don't need to repeatedly fetch it from Facebook, and we fetch and return that from MongoDB, and we send it out to the verify callback using the done method. When the done method is invoked, this data is then available to our app to use as it wants to. Now, if a user profile is not found locally, then we need to create one and then invoke the done method to return the same. We'll do this in the next screencast. For better organization of code, let's hive off this verify callback into its own function and I'll call it auth processor. And we'll reference that in the passport.use statement like so. This way, we can repurpose this function when we bring in Twitter-based authentication a few videos down the line.